him, I said, how do you want to kill yourself? He said, with a gun, which was rather extravagant. Neither of us had a gun. Neither of us had a job or any money.
Nothing.
Killing him with a fork would have been easier. Well, finally, one day I said to him, I have an idea. I'll take you to the Pacific Ocean, and I'll load up all your pockets with sand and stones. And when I get you all full, I'm going to push out in the water. You'll drop like a rock. He said, all right. So on the appointed day, we went down. I loaded them all up, and there he was. I'm ready to push him. When all of a sudden, something caught his eye coming over the horizon. Now, judging by the shape of what was coming on the horizon, in on that wave, it was all ripped and dirty and tattered and torn. It had to have fallen off a boat 5 or 10 years before. But there it was. It picked that particular moment, on that particular day, at that particular spot of the Pacific Ocean to show itself. And my friend saw it, and he took it as a sign from God not to kill himself. It was an old life preserver. And there it came, and landed on his feet. And he said, I can't kill myself. God's telling me here's a life preserver. And I said, oh no. God sent that life preserver, but not for you not to kill yourself. He wants you to kill yourself. He said, how do you figure? I said, God sent it so we could sell it and buy a gun. Which we did. And we got an old Derringer and 1 bullet and a lot of powder, and we stuffed it in there. And there my friend stood, shaking and crying, and it was the moment of truth. And he was crying like a little 5-year-old girl. I love you, I love you. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. It was terrible. I mean, there he was crying and weeping. So finally I looked at him and I said, pull the trigger. And he did. And that one action changed his life forever. Cleaned out all that gray matter in his brain, poked a hole right through the other end. Within a month, he got elected to the United States Senate. And now I understand he's a teacher somewhere in Ukraine. Which goes to show you, once you start going downhill, you never know when you're going to stop. Now, they asked me to be able to ask some questions, and I will, but before I left Hartford, which is where I live now, I live on Farmington Avenue. It's a big, beautiful room. I had a politician friend come to visit. And when we were done with our lunch, he left and went across Farmington Avenue, where he'd get run over by a horse and carriage. But it didn't kill him. It just made him ugly mad. And he yelled something terrible to the driver. But because of the ladies here, I'm not going to tell you what it was. Well, the fella driving the horse and carriage was a nice fella, and he doesn't like to be rude. But with the click-clock of the horses and the thump when he run him over, he wasn't sure exactly what the fella had said. And that's just not right. So he did what most good people would do. He decided the best thing to do would be to bring that horse and carriage around so he could pass by again and hear him more clearly. And that's what killed the politician. So there you have it, a dead politician. So you know it's a happy story. And there he stood. He found himself at the gates of heaven. And he was welcomed to the gates by St. Peter. And St. Peter stood with the podium, and sitting next to St. Peter was a beautiful scale, a simple golden scale. And on the table were a bunch of little stones. And St. Peter explained they were going to review his life. Everybody ends up, when they're dead, at the gates of heaven, and their life is reviewed. And for every good thing he'd ever done, they were going to take a stone and put it on the good side of the scale. And for every bad thing they'd ever done, going to take a stone and put it on the bad side of the scale. And at the end of reviewing their life, depending on which way that scale was bending, was pretty much dependent on whether they'd spend eternity in heaven or in hell. So he said to the fellow, he said, all right, tell me the bad things you've done first. Let's get that open. Well, the fellow thought for a little while, and then he was amazed at what he was about to say. He looked at St. Peter and he said, I've done a lot of little things, but I don't think I've ever done anything so terrible, so awful, that you should take a stone and put it on the bad side of the scale. Well, St. Peter opens the book. It was a considerably larger book than this. There were minor indiscretions, like we all have, but nothing terrible, nothing awful, nothing that required a stone. St. Peter smiled a heavenly smile and blessed him and said, now, tell me the good things you've done in your life. And the fellow right away looked at him and said, I once gave $1 to an orphan child. Yes, he had. St. Peter smiled a heavenly smile, took a stone, put it on the good side of the scale, and God blessed him. And said, now tell me what else you've done good. This time it took him a lot longer to remember something, but then he did. And he looked at St. Peter and he said, I once gave $1 to the church. Yes, he had. St. Peter smiled a heavenly smile, took a stone, put it on the good side of the scale, and God bless him. And then he said, now come on, boy, tell me more good things. And after a long while, the fellow looked up and said, I think those are the only 2 good things I ever did. St. Peter said, oh, try, think again. And he did, but it didn't work. He'd only done 2 good things. Once gave $1 to the church, once gave $1 to an orphan. Well, they both looked at the scale at the same time. Now, it should have been leaning this way because there was no stones on the bad side and 2 stones on the good side, but it hadn't moved a bit. It registered